Welcome to the Ferris Network on television, Debate Night in America, live from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And as Blake noted, Kamala Harris and Democrats et al. Got an enormous break in the past hour with the end or the pause of the Longshoremen's Union strike. Huge. We are just 1 hour away from the most anticipated Senate debate of 2024. Pennsylvania is undoubtedly the most important of all the swing states. Control of the White House and the balance of power in the U.S. Senate flows down the Susquehanna River behind me. Where I am right now, the crossroads of Pennsylvania, is the most important place in politics, in American politics, from sea to shining sea. Latest polling from Emerson College shows us Trump and Harris are tied right now in Pennsylvania. The state boasts the most electoral college votes of any swing state with 19. It is literally a dead heat. As we come on the air tonight, three major stories could all change the presidential race. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith isn't done. New reporting on the coming bombshells about Donald Trump's behavior around January 6th. That is certainly what Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney want you thinking about. The Middle East could still explode. And the very people who will decide the election, rural working class whites in North Carolina and Georgia, say they feel abandoned. Abandoned a week after Hurricane Helene, and the rescue effort keeps failing them over and over and over again. All of those issues, and especially how rural working class whites feel, will be on the stage tonight here in Harrisburg at our affiliate ABC 27. The Trump-backed candidate, Republican David McCormick, is trailing Bob Casey by somewhere between 2 and 4 points, depending on which poll you watch. This is the Emerson College poll, certainly one that McCormick would like to see. He has the momentum. The state's longest-serving Democratic senator, Bob Casey, is there and only 2 points ahead. 8 points still undecided. That is not good for Bob Casey. Fentanyl, fracking, and fertility is going to decide the election here in the Keystone State, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we headed to Northwest Pennsylvania to see how fracking, getting oil out of the ground, became a proxy for not only the war on fossil fuels, but the culture war surrounding everything involving the EV mandates and the Green New Deal. You've been doing this for 36 years?
36.
What's changed?
First 20 years, all I had to worry about was producing oil and gas. Now I spend half my life worried about regulations.
The hot button issue, right, is the concept of a fracking ban. That would mean what?
Well, this well and every well that we have is a hydrofractured well, so it would put us out of business. Almost all the oil and gas in America is hydrofractured, so it would destroy the American energy system.
Also got a first-hand look at how fentanyl is ravaging small-town Pennsylvania. It's not just Pennsylvania, right? It's ravaging rural America and suburban America across the country. We talked with a sheriff who lost his own son. The sheriff's son died of a fentanyl overdose.
But I don't know how anybody in America today does not see, and you mentioned like rural Pennsylvania, but this is nationwide. Nationwide, this is a horrible epidemic that we're facing. And
is there a simple solution to it?
Simple? No.
More on both of those interviews in a moment. Tonight's debate will mirror much of the same key issues in the presidential election. Both candidates will face tough questions on restructuring the American economy to make it more fair, addressing threats to democracy, handling immigration and border security, as well as their plan for health care and affordable housing. Those are the top issues for Pennsylvania voters. Our election forecast from Decision Desk HQ shows Kamala Harris has a 53% chance of winning the Keystone State. And that's important because the winner of this state holds an 85% chance of winning the presidency. We begin tonight with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science for our partners at Decision Desk HQ, and Lee Carter, pollster and president of Meslansky and Partners. Good to see you both. Tranter, start with you. Is it as simple as who wins Pennsylvania wins the White House?
Probabilistically, yes. As you pointed out, whoever wins Pennsylvania, 85% chance of winning the White House. You know, the road for the White House goes through Pennsylvania.
Lee, this news that came in the past hour or so that the port workers are going to go back to work, the longshoremen have agreed to a pause, if you will. You don't want to say it's an enormous gift to Kamala Harris, but I can't imagine it's not an enormous relief when it comes to the polling on the economy.
It's a huge relief, and I'm very, very thankful for all Americans, too, that this has been resolved, because the impact on inflation would have been really, really noticeable. And I still am not sure, based on how long this has gone on, that Americans aren't going to feel the impact of it just a little bit, enough to sort of stop the momentum and so people starting to feel better. But polling on the economy is still not good, despite this fact. I think this would have been a disaster for her. But when you look at how people view the economy, they're not thrilled with where they are. Now, Kamala's closed the gap with Donald Trump on that, but he still leads when it comes to how people view inflation. And that's really more important to most people than just the economy. It's about bringing down prices.
Yeah, inflation has become sort of an et-al for the economy. It's how people feel about their pocketbooks. Things cost too much. We're watching Kamala Harris take selfies. Ripon, Wisconsin, another swing state. Ripon, Wisconsin, home to Ripon College, a little bit more liberal of an area, a bluer area in Wisconsin. She was there with Liz Cheney, Scott, which is this sort of overarching message of big tent Democratic Party from Bernie Sanders and Taylor Swift through Liz and Dick Cheney, all to protect democracy. And then there was this today, fundraising from Kamala Harris on the Jack Smith superseding indictment. The Harris campaign sent out parts of the Jack Smith court filing, the special prosecutor saying, look, this is how dangerous Donald Trump is. I was not trained to believe in coincidences in terms of the DOJ filing, the rollout of Liz Cheney, and now the fundraising. All of that aside, is there a persuadable group of voters that you find in polling who, hearing from Liz Cheney, hearing from what were establishment Republicans about Donald Trump, works?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen any data to support that, and I don't necessarily think that's what the Harris campaign's thinking. Look, Liz Cheney lost her primary, which is why she's not elected anymore by more than 20 points. She's not there to convince even the Nikki Haley voters who are voting in the primary. She's there to make the Democrat voters feel better and that they're on the emboldened side and they're the big tent party. Fundraising's good. It's a good campaign tactic, but it's not necessarily designed to get Republican voters, maybe a few independent here and there, but really shore up her Democratic base to say, hey, we're the big tent party. We've got a lot of people supporting us.
Flip side to that, Lee, is when you do your focus groups and your dial groups, does Democrats continuing to force the issue on January 6th on threats to democracy, for as much as Scott makes the point that it fires up fires up Democrats, does it also fire up Republicans on the other side?
Sure does. I think Republicans have gotten tired of this narrative, and actually they get really angry about it, and they dig their heels in and actually point to how unfair this is, the inconsistencies in how we deal with different kinds of protests. Tim Walz has become a poster child for the difference between how you deal with Black Lives Matter than how you deal with protesters down in D.C. All of this adds up to a huge level of enthusiasm among Republicans. And the thing that I'm also hearing from voters is from both sides, enough with the backwards looking stuff. We know how bad things were. We want to hear how you're going to make things better now. People really want to hear from Kamala Harris on how she's going to fix the economy. The economy as it is, she owns. So people want to know what is going to be different in January if she is president of the United States. She hasn't answered that in a way that satisfies people need to understand how she's going to bring prices down. So that is a really big issue. People want to hear forward-looking messages, not backward-looking. They're tired of the finger pointing.
Scott, one of the great things that you have done for us here at NewsNation and with DDHQ is focus us on the swing counties and the data and how correlated so many of these places are. Correlated being the statistics term that you and my smart sister use to talk about how what happens in one thing sort of mirrors what happens in all of the other places. Swing counties of Pennsylvania, the most crucial swing counties, Erie County, 270,000 people, 83% white, 15% poverty rate. You can see that in the far northwest part of Pennsylvania. Center County, Erie County is not very far from where we were earlier today. And I think about the folks in Erie County and the folks sort of who run northwest to southeast in Pennsylvania, right along the river behind me. Rural whites. And as they watch what is happening in North Carolina, in Georgia, to very similar communities that have been ravaged by Hurricane Helene and who feel forgotten, what is their takeaway? And does people seeing what happens in North Carolina and Georgia affect here in Pennsylvania?
I think, it's funny you bring up those 5 counties there. They're good cross sections of America, not just swing counties in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of white working class voters. There's some suburban voters in there. There's a small cross section of African American, maybe not as much Hispanic representation as some other parts of the country. But by and large, this is middle class America. These counties, some of them voted for Obama in the past. Some of them voted for Biden. Some of them voted for Trump, all back and forth. And they're a good cross section. It'll be interesting. Erie County is probably the one we're going to be looking at closely on election night, because that's going to have a lot of correlation to what the rest of the state is going to be in a state that was decided by less than 200,000 votes. And as you pointed out in the polling earlier, and our forecast probability, it is a pure toss-up. It's going to come down to a few. It's going to come down to a few thousand votes. So every little bit counts. Whether it's the fracking opinion on fracking, whether it's opinion on the economy. You bring up North Carolina and Georgia. They're looking at their government. It doesn't necessarily affect them directly, but they look at how Harris is handling that, and that might extrapolate out to their vote. Every little bit counts. Those are the counties.
I just want to get this soundbite in real quick, Scott. This is Kamala Harris in Augusta, Georgia, yesterday. Take a listen.
The federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food, baby formula, and the like.
Lee, so many Republicans have been making a huge deal out of $750 per family versus $2.4 billion for Ukraine, the latest round. 150,000 families in Georgia and North Carolina, that'd be $16,000 a family. How much immigrants who come across the border get, $10,000 sometimes in gift cards. When you talk about the economy, does what's happening in North Carolina and Georgia in those numbers inform or irritate, I guess maybe the better word in terms of what might matter, voters in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania?
I think it seems like a small amount when you hear, whether you're comparing it to Ukraine or other things, you hear what these people who have lost everything now within the last week, $750 doesn't seem like it's going to be enough to get them much of anything. And there's much more that FEMA can do. So I think it was an interesting choice of proof points to say what you're doing for these folks. I think there's so much more that FEMA can do and should be doing, and all of us should be doing. So I think, whether you're looking at it in comparison of what we're giving out elsewhere, or just looking at it on its face, it seems like it's just not enough. And, Americans want somebody.
There's reporting out there that the reason that FEMA is not doing more is because they are out of money, in their words, because of how much they spent on the migrant crisis, which has not gone over well, as you can imagine, in North Carolina and Georgia. Lee, Scott, thank you both. We appreciate it. Live pictures, Ripon, Wisconsin there of Kamala Harris. She has all but lived in Pennsylvania and will be back here sometime soon, as will Donald Trump on Saturday night. You might remember the Pennsylvania Senate race from 2 years ago. Donald Trump picked Dr. Oz as the Republican and got absolutely waxed. Dave McCormick, one of the two men on the stage tonight, tells me why this time it's going to be different. Welcome back to Harrisburg. Control of the U.S. Senate, which could be decided in tonight's debate, means control of the U.S. Supreme Court appointments, cabinet appointments, and control of anything that happens on abortion, on energy policy, on taxes. Our DDHQ forecast predicts Republicans have a 51% chance of flipping the Senate. So it is a toss-up, much like the election. Pennsylvania may decide it all. 34 seats are up for grabs, but most of them are not really in play. Control of the Senate comes down to just a handful: Michigan, Montana, Nevada, Ohio, Wisconsin, and right here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is interesting because it's a swing state that's voted for the president in 48 of 59 elections. Good batting average. In the presidential race, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are effectively tied, depending on which polling average you look at it. Our DDHQ polling average has Harris at 48.9, Donald Trump at 48.1. But back to the Senate, where Republican challenger David McCormick is trying to unseat Democrat Bob Casey. Right now, McCormick trails Casey by 4 percentage points in the AARP poll, but 6% of voters are still uncommitted to either. Caught up with McCormick to talk about those 6% and how he is going to convince them over the most authentic thing in Pennsylvania to have: some cheesesteaks. So if I were to get the most classic version of a Philly cheesesteak, what would be your advice?
Cheesesteak with
The cheese
and onions. It's the classic. You got to do the classic.
Just like politics, you just got to jump in. You grab it with both hands and jump in.
In Pennsylvania, which very likely could decide not only the presidency but also control of the Senate, you are basically running 4 points behind where Donald Trump is. Trump is tied statistically with Harris.
Yeah.
You're tracking about 4 points behind Casey. Where do you think that comes from? Who is the Trump-Casey voter?
Well, I think you have to start with, I'm the underdog. So I've come into this race against a political family and a guy that's been in office for 34 years. And someone asked me the other day, what about the Casey dynasty? And I said, the nice things about dynasties, they all end at some point. So I think this is the point at which this dynasty ends. But people know Bob Casey's name because it's been in politics for 30 years. People are getting to know me. So the most important thing is not where the polls are at the moment. I think everybody agrees the polls are within margin of error. The important thing is that I've gained enormous ground over the last 60 to 90 days.
Is there places that you as a senator would, as a businessman who became a senator, demand fiscal responsibility from your party?
Well, I would favor on day one a balanced budget amendment. I think that is something that we should, the government, just like our households, our businesses, should have to be able to make the numbers work. Right now we're on a fiscal train wreck. We have a $35 trillion debt, $1 trillion of interest payments. It's bigger than our defense budget, which is $900 billion. Has to be a rule of thumb. When your interest payment is bigger than your defense budget, you're in trouble. But let's not lose sight of how this happened. Republicans and Democrats alike have been spending too much for 20 years. So it's been like this on the charts. But under Biden, it's been a hockey stick. $5 trillion of new spending. And much of that spending has been heavily subsidization of electric vehicles, of solar panels, of wind. We need to look at all sorts of discretionary spending. As I said, we need to look at these huge subsidizations. Just to give you an example of how people are talking about Social Security, put Social Security aside. Let's talk about student loan debt repayment, right? So the Biden administration proposed a $160 billion student loan relief. That's bigger than the Army's budget. This is how expansive and reckless and out of control the Biden-Harris policies would be. Kamala Harris made, and by the way, Bob Casey voted for every one of those spending bills. Now, Kamala Harris gives her big economic speech of how she's going to help the economy. She proposes $2 trillion more of spending, and on top of that says that she wants to regulate the implications of inflation, prices that went up because of too much spending, by getting Venezuelan-like price controls. So the economic vision of what Republicans, the common sense policies of Republicans, President Trump, myself, and others, versus the socialist, reckless spending of the Democrats, Kamala Harris and Bob Casey, who will support her the whole way. That's the real contrast. That's the choice. And people just have to look at where we are in the economy. Bidenomics is not working for most people.
What has changed? What have you learned from the past 2 years and 10 months of running for Senate that has changed you and brought you to a point now where you feel that you can win?
Well, there's winning, and then there's doing the job. And so I think the last 2 years have helped me be in a much better position to win, but also be a much better senator. And listen, it's like anything else. You learn more from failing. You learn more from those challenges that come with that than you do from winning. Because when you win something, you attribute it to your own greatness. When you lose, you sort of scrutinize all the different things. And what I learned is that I wanted to run much more of a retail campaign. I want to be everywhere, 67 counties, every town, every part of our great Commonwealth.
Lots of cheesesteaks.
Lots of cheesesteaks. I think I've done something like 450 visits this calendar year, all across our great Commonwealth. I visited 67 counties. I've done more than 100,000 miles in my truck and my bus. And I feel like I know Pennsylvania in a way that you can only know Pennsylvania when you do all those visits and you're talking to people. And I think I know the problems that people experience. I think I know the kind of leadership they want. Many of the problems are the same, like inflation or fentanyl, which is a disaster because of the wide open border of Harris and Casey. And some of them are unique to the specific areas or the industries. So I feel like I'm very much in touch with the kind of leadership we need. And it's not more of the same. It's shaking things up in Washington. It's going there to fight for the people of Pennsylvania. So I think that's the big difference, and I think that's how I'll be as a senator. I think you campaign how you're going to be as a senator, and I will be very much in touch day in and day out with the needs and the challenges. Final thing I'll say is I thought this last time was a rush. It was 5 months. I jumped in. The primary ended in 5 months. I feel like it is a privilege. I'm honored. I'm excited about it. West Point, the first thing you learn is duty, honor, country. That's why I'm running. I think our country's in trouble. I think I think in the Senate I can bring real leadership that can make a difference. And it's about duty, honor, country. In times of trial, Americans have stepped up, and getting the right leaders in place have made the difference. And I get that affirmation every day. That's what people need. That's what people want.
Good luck in the debate.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The debate now 34 minutes away. Live pictures of the stage there. Kamala Harris said she wanted to ban fracking. That is an enormous deal in Pennsylvania. Now she says she doesn't. That will be on the debate stage tonight. We went out to the oil fields to show you why fracking not only might decide the election, but our future as a country. Welcome back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The issues in Pennsylvania and why we are here is not only because of the debate that's coming in about 30 minutes, but because the issues in Pennsylvania mirror those across the country, except Pennsylvania is a swing state, so they get to decide most likely who is the president. Donald Trump says he can solve the economy and all of our economic problems and inflation with one simple proposal: drill, baby, drill. Kamala Harris is under a lot of fire for her suggestion to ban fracking, a position she claims to have walked back on. Fracking is one of the single most important issues here in Pennsylvania, and for good reason. It is a huge part of the economy here. It's also a huge part of the economy all over America. That's why we came here to figure it out, go out on the ground. Voters trust Trump more than they do Harris on the issue of fracking. Fracking, though, means so much more than just drilling oil out of the ground with sand and high-pressure water. To figure that out, we went up to far northwest Pennsylvania, 4-hour drive from Harrisburg, way past the paved roads, to figure out how fracking has become a proxy war for the war on fossil fuels, for EV mandates, for the Green New Deal. Met up with Arthur Stewart. He runs Cameron Energy. He founded it almost 40 years ago. Works alongside his wife and 4 children. You've been doing this for 36 years?
36.
What's changed?
First 20 years, all I had to worry about was producing oil and gas. Now I spend half my life worried about regulations.
The hot button issue, right, is the concept of a fracking ban. That would mean what?
Well, this well and every well that we have is a hydrofractured well, so it would put us out of business. Almost all the oil and gas in America is hydrofractured, so it would destroy the American energy system.
Do you understand the concept, the worry, the fear about this?
About hydrofracturing? No, we've been hydrofracturing here in Pennsylvania for over 60 years. Before that, they created fractures with nitroglycerin, so it's been going on for over a century. The fears are simply unfounded. Our community is a natural resource-based economy. Timber and oil and gas are what keep us surviving around here. So for us, a hydrofracturing ban, I have 55 employees, we'd be out of business. The community already has lost all of its manufacturing over the last 30 years, so whoever's still around can turn out the lights if we have a hydrofracturing ban.
Just tough work.
Oh, when people come out to see a hydrofracture job, the comment we get is, wow, I can't believe guys still work that hard. It's a heck of a lot of work to produce energy, but we can't live without it. So I wish people could be out here. I wish every American could be out here. But conventional oil and gas like these wells are still critical to the United States and to our local economy. So we did a study a few years ago. We provide thousands of jobs just in this area and over $1 billion to the state economy.
You think about where we're at in October right now and what the next administration means to you guys. Is politics second only to what? Safety now is a discussion?
Well, safety... I struggle to answer your question. Of course, safety is important, but if politics drives us out of business, I guess safety becomes irrelevant, right?
So for you guys, this is an existential threat?
Oh, zero doubt about it. We're struggling to stay in business.
What convinces you that under a Trump administration and or Dave McCormick becoming senator, any of this gets better?
Well, we had the experience of 4 years of the Trump administration. He made some regulations that had some exceptions for small producing wells like this. He walked the walk in terms of trying to dial back oppressive regulations.
How you doing? Nice to see you. I'm Leland. How you doing? So when you guys think about the election and who wins, is that as simple as who wins decides whether you guys have a job or not?
I mean, to me, kind of, because with the economy and everything, everything's so expensive right now. I'm working here so I can make ends meet, and I still kind of struggle.
What is your fear if Harris wins, Bob Casey wins the Senate race? What does that mean for you guys?
She says she changed her mind. She's with fracking, but what takes her for changing her mind again? Be like, nope, never mind, I'm banning it.
You guys don't believe her?
No, I don't.
When politicians talk about banning fracking and putting the oil and gas business out of business, do you think they understand what that means to you guys?
Well, first of all, we wouldn't have a job.
But do you think they understand that or care?
Probably not. I don't think for a second that they understand what it means, period, for them. You know what I mean?
They shut down fracking. It's no longer American oil.
Do you understand for lack of a better term, the hatred of fracking?
No, it is irrational. It'd be like saying we want to ban food production. That's how critical oil and gas is to us. Everybody uses it every day. The average American uses more oil than anybody in the world. It's in everything. It's in our food. It's in our plastic computers. It's in our cars. It's whether it's an EV or a regular car. It's in our windmills. It's in our solar panels. There we go. So Pennsylvania grade crude is that yellow color. It's very slippery. So this goes into crankcases for lubrication. So all the locomotives in America, all the cargo ship engines, even wind turbines use hundreds of gallons of this because of its lubricating quality. It's paraffin based. So
you guys are pumping literally money out of the ground. And the environmentalists say, look, you can afford more regulations. You can afford to make this a little bit cleaner. What's wrong with that?
They should come see our books. Yeah, we're not subsidized like wind and solar. We don't get any government money. So we're competing not only against inflation, but we're competing against companies that are getting billions of dollars of subsidies. It's just painful.
With us now, NewsNation political contributor Chris Hahn, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast and his own radio show, The Chris Hahn Show. Good to see you, my friend. number one predictor in success in presidential elections. This person cares about people like me. Kamala Harris just gave an enormous speech in Wisconsin in which she talked about threats to democracy and how terrible Donald Trump is. How does that, 30 days out from an election, convince those guys on that rig tonight who are watching that she cares about people like them?
Well, you'd have to measure all the other speeches she gave and then say, is she not addressing issues of the working men and women in this country, which she most surely is. But I think that the threat to democracy is a real threat, and Donald Trump poses that threat, and I think he put it out there. I know that, I saw the pollster segment at the beginning of the show. Negative campaigning works. It's why they still do it. It's why everybody complains about it, but it absolutely moves the needle, and anybody who says it doesn't has never been on a campaign.
Look, and when it comes to working class voters, you're right about negative campaigning works. And to be fair, Donald Trump does a lot of his own negative campaining. But when it comes to working class voters,
all day and all night, it's all he does.
Hemorrhaged them. Right. Democratic voters, though, have hemorrhaged working class voters. This was important, though. These guys weren't partisan. They were worried about their livelihoods. There's a difference there. And you think about union voters, and obviously Kamala Harris got a huge gift by the longshoreman strike working. But union voters, working class voters, pretty similar group. Harris currently only leads that group by 9 points. Biden won them by 19. Hillary Clinton won them by 12. Okay, that was the lowest mark for a Democrat since 1984. Is there a thought that what Kamala Harris is saying about the economy, which everyone tells us is the number one issue, just isn't resonating?
Well, she's made up significant ground on the economy with Donald Trump since she took over for Joe Biden. Significant ground. So I think it is resonating. You're right, though. Democrats do have a problem with working class voters. We have been bleeding them off for years. And had we still had them in 2016, Donald Trump never would have been president of the United States. And if they come back to the party that is actually fighting for the working class voters, who will not make it harder to join a union, they would actually be better off with the Democratic Party.
You just said who's fighting for working class. You just said who's fighting for working class voters. These guys I talked to today, okay, and tens of thousands like them from Northwest PA all the way down the river here through the furniture factories that closed. They all think that Kamala Harris is trying to put them out of a job.
So I've been listening to the Republicans trying to blame Kamala Harris for everything that happened with Joe Biden the last 4 years. Yet nobody banned fracking the last 4 years. In fact, we're producing more natural gas and more oil now than we ever have in this country. So why did
these guys tell me they're making less money than ever?
Why didn't it happen over the last 4 years? They are making more money than ever, but things cost more than ever right now, unfortunately. So there's a balance that has to happen. But that said, we are producing more natural gas and oil than ever. And the guy who owns that rig, he sure as heck is making more money than he ever did in his life.
Well, he told me he's not because of what happened in January with the Biden administration policy change on natural gas. That wasn't the topic of Kamala Harris's rally today. It was Liz Cheney. Take a listen to Liz Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris.
Vice President Harris has dedicated her life to public service. I know that she loves our country, and I know that she will be a president for all Americans. As a conservative, as a patriot, as a mother, as someone who reveres our Constitution, I am honored to join her in this urgent cause.
This was my favorite part of that, Han. Kamala Harris to Liz Cheney. I also want to thank your father, Vice President Dick Cheney, for his support and for what he has done to serve our country. You live long enough, Democrats, progressive Democrats, will say nice things about Dick Cheney. There's hope for all of us.
Look, man, everybody who serves deserves their thanks, right? We should be thanking people for what they've done in their life, even if we don't agree with them, as long as they follow the rules of the Constitution.
Okay.
I'll thank him when he's playing golf in Scotland in January, because that's where he's going to be. Or maybe March.
Hey, look, instead of you playing golf in Scotland in January, that's dedication. I'll see you soon, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you. This struck at our core as we traveled through Pennsylvania, this issue. It's not just in Pennsylvania, it's across America. 113,000 Americans were killed by fentanyl last year. That's more than lost in the Vietnam and Korean Wars combined in 1 year, to 747 crashing every other day. Neither side, Republicans or Democrats, want to talk about how to stop the leading killer of young Americans. Why it needs to come up on the debate stage when we come back. Something absolutely awful in common. They lead the country in fentanyl deaths. Our trip across Pennsylvania today revealed a cruel truth. Nobody is talking about the #1 killer of young Americans. It is so bad that fentanyl killed the son of a local sheriff. So we went to talk to him. What's it like as the sheriff trying to combat a drug that killed your son?
So what started this whole process with me being involved in any of this was a direct comment of a hatred towards the drug. And we're not talking a pharmaceutical level. That's not what this is. This is a poison that's flooding from across the border coming in. So it's drawn a hatred. At no point am I saying that because of that fentanyl that created my son to be an addict. That's not what happened. He was an addict before that. What it did do is provide a poison that was able to take his life swiftly.
When you're on the ground in law enforcement as a father, is there a bigger threat right now to the average American kid than fentanyl?
Right now? No. No,
it's the biggest.
It's the biggest. I mean, we battle mental health issues constantly. Some of that is attributed to it. But when you're out buying, whether it, like you said, the marijuana, it can be laced in anything. So when you think you're buying something as recreational, and again, not condoning that, I'm not saying that's right, but it happens.
You think about what fentanyl has done to rural America, whether it be Pennsylvania, rural Ohio, Kentucky, where I am from, in Missouri. Do you think folks in Washington, New York, Los Angeles understand that?
I don't know how they don't.
But they still don't. R.J. Harris is with us, host of the R.J. Harris Breakfast Show on WHP 580 here in Harrisburg. Also along with us, Notice reporter Catherine Schwartz. Nice to see both of you. R.J., help us understand, at least in Pennsylvania, is there anybody here who fentanyl's life has not touched?
I don't believe so. You know, there was a time when fentanyl was something that I heard a lot about, I talked a lot about, but it didn't affect me. And then over time, one by one, you have families who fall victim to it. And kids who grew up with my kids die as a result of fentanyl and overdoses. So I do think that it touches every family.
Catherine, for something that has gone and permeated through the American culture in this way, it was not a question in either presidential debate or in the vice presidential debate. Why?
It's true that it didn't come up in any of those debates, though you do hear it in pretty much every single Trump rally, Trump speech. You see Harris stopping on fentanyl as well, having stops talking about this, and certainly in the Senate races and down ballots. So it wasn't in the debates. It's still on people's minds.
And it will probably be in the debate here tonight in Harrisburg, a couple of minutes away. Exactly how tonight we'll decide control of the Senate when we come back. Just moments away from the Pennsylvania Senate debate, Democratic incumbent Bob Casey, his challenger, Republican Dave McCormick. With us now, R.J. Harris, Pennsylvania radio host, Catherine Schwartz, Notice reporter who covers politics here in Pennsylvania. R.J., Dave McCormick lost the primary last time to Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz then lost the general. Is this a different Dave McCormick than it was 2 years ago?
I don't know that it's a different Dave McCormick. I think it's a different situation totally. And there is upside here. There's no question about it. You mentioned the new Emerson poll, but something that Jim Lee from Susquehanna Polling pointed out about a week ago on my show when their new poll came out is Bob Casey's been in the Senate for 18 years, yet in not one of these polls has he cracked 50%.
That's all. That 50% is always the issue. Catherine, how closely are we seeing Bob Casey tie himself to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
Very closely. For Casey, he is one of Biden's strongest allies in the Senate, or was. They talked frequently. And with Harris, Casey's main economic positions, they align very closely with the Biden, now Harris, would-be Harris administration. And it's the same thing I'll point out on the other side with McCormick and Trump. Very few policy differences between the two on both sides of this ticket compared to other Senate races where we do see a distinction.
Yeah, we often see, especially Democratic senators, trying to distance themselves a little bit. We saw Democratic senators not come to the DNC because they were up and worried about that, RJ. Does that matter here when you've got such a battleground state in Pennsylvania?
I think it matters a lot, and that's why the polls are as tight as they are.
Why are Harris and Trump tied and McCormick still 4 points down? What's he have to say tonight?
I believe that what he has to do tonight is talk about the two top issues in Pennsylvania, and they are the economy and immigration. Fracking's an important issue. Abortion's an important issue. But really, what we're spending out of our pocket every day. You talked about hardworking Pennsylvanians, without question, and they're not gifted. Kamala Harris's middle-class family was rather gifted. She never talks about her father, but she spent weekends with him, and tenured professors today at Stanford make $298,000. Okay? So adjusted for time, he made good money, and so did she. She was not a low-level researcher. So the middle-class family that she grew up with is vastly different than the people that you talk to here in Pennsylvania.
Catherine, are we seeing any difference? We see the two men on the stage, just to let our viewers know what's going on. This is being produced by our local Next Star stations there in Harrisburg. So we're gonna keep going here up until the beginning of the debate. Catherine, to you, this concept of white working class voters that both Harris and Bob Casey are trying to talk to, it does not seem to be getting through, does it?
Well, that's where Casey's from. I mean, Scranton, working class, that's what he stands for.
Joe.
Scranton Joe, Scranton Casey.
But it's not resonating. I will tell you, I told everyone, stop talking at the top of the hour, but we're going to go another minute here because the debate doesn't start so our other stations can join us. Is there any change in the messaging over the next 30 days?
When it comes to Casey, it's been a message on the middle class, on economic opportunity, on just helping people to get by, same as we see from Harris Wells. So unless something incredibly distinctive happens with the economy in the next 30 days, don't expect a change in that message.
RJ, I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds. Who is calling your radio show still undecided?
Nobody.
So who are these people in the polls?
I'm not sure, but it's a fairly sizable segment. It's somewhere
4 to 6%, yeah.
Right, at a low, up to 12%. So I'm not sure. The people who are calling me know who they're voting for, and I'm on a conservative radio station, so we know.